All right, well, it's great to see everyone here this afternoon. I think I'm a little high. Okay, there we go. Very happy to have you all out for our parent seminar. Very blessed to have Lonnie Jones with us, teaching primarily on the topic of parenting in a digital world. And so I'm going to give an introduction to Lonnie Jones, and I'm very, very excited. So he's been married to his wife, Jackie, for 39 years. He has one adult daughter and a son-in-law, 3 grandkids, Gunnar, Rowan, and Gage. His wife, Jackie, is a retired teacher of volleyball and a retired volleyball coach, and is currently training 2 Spanish water dogs who are named Oreo and Indy. Lonnie has been a minister and working in ministry in some capacity since 1980, and he does a lot of ministry work with Meridianville Church of Christ. He privately practices counseling. He's a consultant and has also authored some books and does a podcast, Keeping Up with Lonnie Jones, the Lonnie Jones Podcast Adventure. He serves as a chaplain for Huntsville Police Department, has worked primarily with the SWAT team for the last 32 years, and Lonnie also teaches defensive tactics, rappelling, and crisis intervention and de-escalation. So, I was just thinking about, Lonnie, how, you are skilled in defensive tactics and, I assume some martial arts there. I feel like your kids must respect you a lot more for that reason. So that's actually, he's going to teach you how to do that. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, so Lonnie, thank you again for coming. Without further ado, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Well, it is a pleasure to be with you. This chaplain thing is super, super weird. I don't coach stick and ball sports. And so when we got a chance to give back to the community, I got invited to be a chaplain with the police due to something that happened in 1986. And I got called in on a thing when I was a 29-year-old youth minister. And they decided, hey, it would be nice to have some guys we could call anytime. And so I got to be one of the first chaplains in the new program. And that first year they said, hey, we'd like you to spend primarily all your time with the boys in black. And so I got assigned to their SWAT team, and they invited me to train with them. And so instead of just go riding around, I spend every training day with them. And so, and I don't do much. I'm a bad guy. I've been playing hide and seek from the police for 32 years. I can't teach you how to clear this building, but I can show you where you get killed in it. And so because of that presence, and we call it the ministry of presence, I'm just kind of adopted as a guy with the police department. So they let me teach at the academy, and they let me teach stress management, they let me teach crisis intervention. And then through the years, I've wrestled with these guys because, again, I didn't play stick and ball sports. But as a junior in high school, our PE coach, I went to Oxford High School, Coach Houston, he'd take a semester, fundamentals of tennis, fundamentals of basketball, fundamentals of tumbling. And my junior year, he brought a guy in from the FBI who did self-defense. And that spoke to me. I was like, I like that. That's really, really cool. And so I started kind of goofing around with it. Well, some of the cops wanted some extra training, and as a chaplain, I'd go roll around with these guys. Well, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu hit the world, and the Gracie family and all that. And we got enmeshed in that a little bit. And one of the guys that we were doing this back in the day ended up being a captain. And he decided to start a campaign, make it mandatory. And he was working out with this jiu-jitsu crew, and the chief let him teach on shift. And then as he became a captain, he was like, okay, we need to certify some guys as instructors. And the chief said, Lonnie, would you like to certify as one of my instructors? So I'm a civilian instructor in defensive tactics, and we teach this thing called Gracie Survival Tactics. And I teach the class at noon on Tuesdays. When I'm not doing it with the cops, I'm a member of a little club. I'm in a cult. It's called 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu, if you know who Eddie Bravo is or anything like that. I'm one of those guys. But that, I'm not a competitive level fighter or anything like that. We teach positional control, and we teach 100 seconds. Whoever controls the distance controls the damage. Whoever controls the pace controls the encounter. You learn those 2 things in my class, you could survive. You're not going to win any belts or trophies, but you could probably survive. And my friend here in the back reminded me that I put him to sleep in Paragould, Arkansas. And I feel bad about that because he didn't know to tap. Anyway, so when you start talking about parenting, and I hate to play this card, But, having started ministry in the 80s, I remember when TV was going to ruin the world. And then I remember when MTV was going to ruin the world. And then I remember when cable TV was going to ruin the world. Well, guess what's going to ruin the world now? Computers. And now cell phones. And now iPads. The Bible says nothing about the digital world. But the digital world assaults a lot of things that the Bible talks about. And so we'll spend most of tonight talking about some theoretical stuff. And then tomorrow we'll use a passage out of 1 Thessalonians to talk about the things that as parents we should be and the things that as parents we should do. But for the first part, let's just look at some things about parenting. I'm going to assume this is awake. Okay. So, this is your deal with parenting. If you'll notice this, I think it's an inverse proportionate diagram. Somebody told me that's technically not an inverse proportionate diagram. But you'll notice that where you have a lot of dependence, you have very little independence. And as you move across the screen, the more independence you get, the less dependence you have. Everybody see that pretty clear? Now, that may not be an inverse proportion. I think it is, but, my algebra teacher explained to me that I had a direct proportionate relationship with distance and grades. She said, the closer you sit to Marcia Carter, the lower your grades will be. The further away you sit from Miss Carter, the higher your... Well, this is the opposite of that. When you have a lot of independence, you have zero dependence. So when you're born at birth, you have zero independence, and you have 100% dependence. You can't even roll over without help. You don't control what goes in. You don't control what goes out. You don't get to make any choices. You get those little bitty girls, and you put those ribbons on their head that are bigger than they are, and they can't do anything about it because they don't have any fine motor control. And so they wait, and as you move across this thing, you get more independence and more dependence. So if you'll notice this middle slot right here, you see those two vertical lines? That represents those of you who have teenagers. Because a teenager has as much dependence as he does independence. And our job is to foster those children learning to be self-reliant and moving away from us, because theoretically, my children will outlive me. There'll be a point where they can't depend on my money, they can't depend on my decisions, they can't depend on my choices, they can't depend on my values, they have to do them for themselves. Well, as a teenager, you've got as much buy-in and dependence as you do independence. You have a job, you have a car, but you live in my house. You have your own cell phone, but I pay the bill. I've got my own job, my own money, and I want to buy video games. So you've got this kind of plus minus here, there thing. And so that's why raising teenagers is so very, very interesting, because they're little bitty adults without the prefrontal cortex development that allows them to have executive function and control. Their inhibition, it does not exist yet. That's why teenagers post weird, dumb things on Facebook, all right? Or Twitter or TikTok or whatever it is they're posting on now. So what our job is to do is to move them from dependence on us and into independence. And actually, a deeper point of that is to move them into spiritual independence, or what I call spiritual self-reliance. In the book, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World, Stephen Glenn talks about the things that it takes to move a child from dependence to independence. And years ago, when I was a youth minister, I wrote Dr. Glenn and said, I'd like to take some of the things that you talk about and like to make a spiritual application of them and overlay them on a church ministry and talk about spiritually self-reliant people. And he gave me permission to do that in my publications and in my presentations. And so basically this is a piggyback off of the things that he writes about. So, even if your kids don't grow up and get a college degree, even if your kids don't grow up and make a lot of money, even if your kids don't even get married and they live as a hermit under a bridge, if they're spiritually self-reliant, if they can make decisions based on the Word of God to make choices, you've been a successful parent. Would you agree with that? Okay. So the first thing is, when we start talking about parenting children in a digital world, I think the first thing we need to understand is digital has very little to do with it. Are we spiritual creatures in a physical world, or do we define ourselves as physical creatures in a physical world? Because we're dichotomous. We've got two natures. I've got the flesh side, the temporal side, the impermanent side, and I've got a side of me that'll last forever. And depending on how much emphasis I put onto which existence is going to affect a lot of my choices. And so once we change the idea that, we're going to define success based on a different thing, then how much influence the digital world has on us and what the digital world does to us and for us becomes a totally different thing. When you talk about raising self-reliant children, there are basically the 7 significant things. There's 3 perceptions and 4 skills. Okay? So when a child is at your house and you're trying to teach them how to interact with the world, you want them to come out of your house with 3 perceptions. Basically, these are what we call implicit beliefs. Now, every person I've ever dealt with who was addicted did not possess those 3 beliefs. I am powerless over my addiction and must have a higher power to rescue me. That's right out of the AA book. We'll look at number 3. I can influence what happens to me. Well, when an addict starts looking at, and we don't really know why those thoughts develop, but we do. When we're growing up in our home of origin, we create what we call implicit beliefs. And an implicit belief is the rules that I apply to life, and they may or may not be accurate. Nobody walks around in my head, and nobody walks around in your head. And so we assume that the view I have of the world is the same view everybody else has of the world, right? I spoke about my algebra teacher earlier. There are people who think everybody's good at math. Stop it. We're not. Okay? My algebra teacher found out my brother is Gerald Jones. He's the attorney of record for Faulkner University. She found out I was his little brother. She asked me, was I adopted? When I graduated with my master's degree, I had to pass behavioral and inferential statistics. And while I was in that graduate level class, in my late 20s, early 30s, the stuff my math teacher taught me in high school algebra clicked in my brain. A part of my brain was just asleep, and then it went, I understand this stuff. And I made a really good grade in that class. The lady that taught algebra at Oxford High School was named Mally Long. She had a doctorate from MIT. And she ended up teaching high school algebra in Oxford, Alabama. I don't know what she did wrong, but that's where she ended up. Well, I called her on the phone. I said, can I speak to Dr. Long? This is Dr. Long. Dr. Long, this is Lonnie Jones. The Lonnie Jones? I said, yes, ma'am, it's the Lonnie Jones. She said, and what correctional institution are we dialing from? Dr. Long, I'm not in prison. I just finished my master's degree. Okay, so if you're good at math, you think everybody's good at math. Guess what? We're not. I'm not good at math, but I can draw. I thought everybody could draw. My friends would come over to the house. We'd play outside on the swing set. We'd climb the trees. It would rain. We'd have to go inside. What do you want to do? Let's draw. We don't draw. What do you mean you don't draw? You're a communist? Well, people who can draw can't do math. People who can do math usually can't draw. People who can draw and do math are architects. So they make more money than all of us. But so we have these implicit ideas. Well, these are the ideas that as your children leave your home, they have to believe as an implicit set of rules. Now, you don't always get to decide how your children come to these conclusions. A lot of times, you have 2 children grow up in the same house with basically the same experience. And one kid says, hey, I hate baseball. Dad made us play. And one kid says, I love baseball. My kids will play baseball. Well, it really depends on the perspective of the child. So these are not causal, but they're correlative. Now, there's some things we can do to foster these perceptions. But the perceptions are, number one, I'm capable. We need to teach our children that there are things you can do for yourself. And you need to do for yourself. Cook, clean, laundry, feed your own dog, cut the grass, make contributions to the family. Your job as a parent is to prepare your children for the path, not prepare your path for the children. And we don't do our children any good if we don't teach them to be competent in some things. Let them solve some problems. When you do a narrative in the Bible, when you study, David and Goliath, or you study the Ark or whatever, those things are really not written with a doctrinal idea. They're just telling us about the people who interacted with God. And so a lot of times we have to make observational stuff about them. And a lot of times we read those things and we can read into them lots of things. But, there's not a specific doctrinal purpose for the woman at the well. There are a lot of things you can observe about that. Well, when you look at the story of Moses runs away from Egypt. He runs to the land of Midian. He runs away and he finds a well. So if you run away from home, you really like to find a source of fresh water. You can live a long time without food. You can't live very many days without water. So Moses is a runaway and he finds a well. So he's sitting at this well. And out of the forest or out of the plains or from the sheep fields, guess who shows up? 7 girls. Well, this run away from home deal's not bad. I ran away from home, I found fresh water and 7 girls. Touchdown, Moses, all right? So as he's sitting here at this well, he watches this drama unfold. The girls are getting water from the well. Water weighs 8 pounds to the gallon. And so they're doing either a dip, a ladle, or they're doing a straight pull. They're getting water, and they're pouring it in these little troughs. So if you could take one of your chairs and turn it sideways and make a little V, you got these long, low, V-shaped troughs, because sheep won't stick their head in a bucket to drink. My cup runneth over. You have to fill their bucket up, because sheep are very paranoid. Everything that eats sheep. So these girls have to pour this water in these low troughs so their sheep can get water, and then they take them to the fold. Well, the girls pour the water in the troughs, and the shepherds come out of the woods, and they run the girls off, and they scatter their sheep. They water their sheep, and then they leave, and the girls have to regather their flock and have to rewater their sheep. On this occasion, Moses rescues them, because apparently Moses has one skill set, and that's conflict resolution. He's killed an Egyptian, and now he whips a bunch of shepherds, okay? So Moses does that. As you read this text, the girls come home, and the dad says, "Why are you home so early?" Now, if they're home early, that means they've been coming home what? Late. So they've got this ongoing thing with the shepherds. They come in after dark. "Hey, where you girls been?" Shepherds. "Oh, it's shepherds again?" "Yeah, the shepherds again." But an Egyptian rescued us. Now that's a cool story in and of itself, because Moses is not an Egyptian. Moses' mother's a Hebrew. Moses' father's a Hebrew. Therefore, Moses is okay? If your cat has kittens in the oven, they're kittens, not biscuits, okay? So Moses is a Hebrew, but for some reason his demeanor, his look, his dress, everybody thinks he's an Egyptian. That's a different story for a different day. But on a regular basis, these 7 girls come in and tell their dad, "We're late because the shepherds ran our flocks off." And you notice Jethro, the girl's dad, didn't write a nasty letter to the shepherds' dads. He didn't write a nasty letter to the Sheep Herders Association. And he didn't go out there and stand by the well with his stick and camp out. You know what he let those girls do? Deal with their problem. It's a lot of times we get involved in kid drama, and that's all it is, a kid drama. Kid drama will fix itself. You don't have to be involved in it. Okay? And a lot of times what we would overreact to as parents, think about your kid goes to the well and a bunch of guys scatters your flock. We'd be on CNN. But these girls' dad said, "Hey, I'm not always going to be here. You're going to inherit a sheep farm, and you're going to have to deal with guys who are shepherds." And he let them learn to deal with it. Those girls learned they were capable. And so learning, first of all, that I'm capable. Number 2, learning that I'm significant. And learning that I'm significant is basically that I have some inherent importance. I'm not the most important thing in the world, neither do I have no value, but I have some significance. If I want my dad to play ball with me, and I cut the grass, he'll have more time to play ball because he doesn't have to cut the grass. Oh. If I want to spend time and be liked with people, then I have some ability to do that. So significance comes, self-esteem comes from confidence. Confidence comes from competence. And learning that I have some inherent significance. I'm not the most important thing in the world, which is a problem in our society, but neither I have no value and I'm weak and powerless, which is a problem in our society. What needs to be met is in the middle. The problem with digital stuff, I give my kid an iPad, I give my kid a phone, I give my kid a tablet, I give my kid a Switch. He entertains himself for hours. And he learns 2 messages. Number one, I go to my room and I isolate myself and I do all this stuff, and the world goes on without me. Mom cooks supper, Dad cuts grass, my brother does this, my brother. I'm not really important. They get along well without me. He loses the sense of family interaction. He doesn't participate in rituals. He doesn't participate in traditions. He doesn't participate in any family stuff. But at the same time that he's doing this stuff and kind of gets this one message that says, I'm really not that significant because I'm not interacting and they're still going on, he becomes inherently selfish. Because playing with that machine gives you a hit of dopamine. And every time I scroll, every time I move, every time I flash, every time I play one of those games are designed with a compulsion loop. The same guys who designed the gambling machines in Vegas design your video games. They've hired neuropsychologists and neurobehaviorists to say, hey, what do we have to do with this machine to give you just enough rewards to keep you coming back to play it? Even in solitaire. You win enough solitaire, you'll play enough solitaire, right? And you may go for a little while and all of a sudden you can't lose. Well, what they're doing is they're keeping you engaged. So then this child gets this idea that my interest and my focus and my wants and my dopamine is more important than anything else. And then when a parent says, hey, you've been on this too long, I'm taking away from you, you get dopamine withdrawal. And those children become very violent. They become very angry. And at-risk behavior is associated with a high level of dopamine interaction simply because you've been involved in the digital world. And so what the digital world does is it undermines the I'm significant. I can spend all my time doing this and the world goes on without me. I must not be significant. Or I'm the only thing that matters because of me being involved in my thing. Because children lie, cheat, and steal to have their thing once you take them away from it. And so they're getting this mixed message. This is called cognitive dissonance. And children who grew up with cognitive dissonance don't really know what the rules are. And it's creating a high level of dysfunction in our kiddos. And then there's this false notion that your children are what's known as digital natives and that you're digital immigrants. And the idea is that I didn't grow up with technology. I've got 2 degrees and did all my research papers on a thing called a typewriter. Okay, I couldn't do word correct or autocorrect or any of that stuff. I had to mark things out with white paste. I didn't grow up with a computer. Our phone still hung on the wall. My grandson can lean on the couch and turn the stuff on an iPad with his toe. He knows how to swipe left. I mean, and so there's this idea, and it's the guys who sell this stuff says, hey, look, you're a digital immigrant. The kids growing up now are digital natives. They're smarter and brighter than you are because they know this stuff intuitively, and you don't need to interfere with their growth and development. That is, number one, at best, bad science, because the research is not there, and everything they use to tell you is good is anecdotal, observational research. It's not. You can't put any empirical numbers to it. And at best, it's bad science. At worst, it's a con game. They're in denial of the negative impact this stuff has on their kids. But if I can tell you, make your kids smarter, it'll make your kids brighter, it'll make your kids have a better college degree. All those things, in fact, there's a group of people, their only marketing research is marketing to moms. And guess what they tell moms? You'll be a better mom if your kids have digital toys. And it's a lie. So the kids don't learn that they're significant, or they learn to put too much significance on their own wants and their own ideas. Does that make sense? Third perception is I can influence what happens to me. My choices affect my outcomes. Now, we'll spend a little time, we'll come back and visit this, and we'll talk about a thing called emotional intelligence and how the digital world interferes with that. So the 3 perceptions: I'm capable, I'm significant, and I can influence what happens to me. Your choices affect your outcomes. How you decide to behave in something determines whether or not you're successful at it, determines whether or not you enjoy it. It basically is it takes away the victim mentality. And I see a lot of that on digital bullying. This person said this about me, and Well, other people's words only have the power you give them. Period. I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of God to salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. God's word is limited by whether or not I buy into it. Now, at the end of time, when all things are done, everyone will confess that Jesus is Lord. But on this side of eternity, what God says, I get to decide whether I buy into it or not. I got to live what I want to live. God's words in and of itself can't make me do anything. Well, if God's words is limited that way, your words certainly are. Right? And this is hard for people, and it's really, really hard to pass on to our kids. I call it the light switch principle. If this turns it on, guess what it will also do? It will turn it off. It works both ways or it doesn't work. If, big if, it's this tall. If I could make you mad, I could make you happy. If I could make you cheat, I could make you faithful. If I could make you drink, I could make you sober. If I could make you quit, I could make you stay. If I could make you kill yourself, I could keep you alive. Your words only have the power that you allow them to have. Plain and simple. And yet we get our self-esteem, we get who we are and what we are based on this outward sense of approval. And if somebody says something bad about me on the internet, so I do this bullying thing, and if you wanted to play with it, I usually do it and I draw on it. But I draw this little doghouse. And the dog that lives in the house name is Fido. F-I-D-O. Fido stands for forget it, drive on. Okay? So here's Fido's little house. And outside of Fido's little house, you have this list of statements. And the first question you ask is, you said something about me or you said something to me. Question number one, is it true? And that's yes or no. It's either true or it's not true, right? Now, if you say something about me, Lonnie, you're an idiot. Lonnie, you're dumb. Lonnie, you're whatever. I get to ask, is that true or not true? Kids without any adult modeling, spending enough time with mature adults to learn how to navigate life, only have a sense of self that is based on these implicit beliefs. They only walk around in their head and they may not feel good enough. They might feel smart enough. A lot of our kids who grow up in the extreme right wing of our fellowship, what I call the super uber rabid conservatives. Those kids grow up and they don't believe that they can't be good. They believe they can't be good enough. And so because they're not good enough, then anything shatters their existence. And kids suffer from emotional dysregulation anyway. I'm kind of a C student by nature. Okay? That wall is ideal. That wall is unacceptable. If I'm in the room, I'm a happy guy. I don't need to be the master. I just need to be competent. I don't have to be the best. I just want to be my best. I sent my jiu-jitsu instructor a picture of a squirrel with an arrow through its head and said, this is why I don't have a black belt. I have other hobbies, okay? I do other things. Kids don't do that. Kids have ideal and unacceptable separated like this. If I'm not the best, I'm the worst. If you didn't let me do that, you didn't let me do anything. If they don't like me, I'll never have a boyfriend again. And all of a sudden, their ability to dysregulate, if somebody says something negative about them, they fall apart. Well, the first question you've got to ask, hey, somebody said this about you. Number one, is it true? And if it's not true, you give it to Fido. Forget it, drive on. Now, sometimes you can say something about me and it's true. Lonnie, you are short and bald. Is this true? Yes. Second question, can I change it? No. Forget it, drive on. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. How do I cope with it? What can I do with what I've got? Our children spend so much time, especially in social media, comparing who they are and thinking about what they're not rather than just celebrating who they are. That's a terrible way to keep score. Comparing my insides, what I know about me, to your outsides, only what I can see about you. Everybody looks good in warm-ups. Okay? We have a saying with SWAT, everybody can shoot paper. If you're a civilian gun handler, I'm proud of you. I'm glad you can shoot paper. Paper doesn't shoot back. You find out if you can shoot or not when you're moving and shooting and the stuff's flying your direction. That's a real different animal. Okay? So I stand on the line with some guy who's a target shooter and he can shoot. Yeah, big fat hairy deal. But if you've just shot targets, you haven't been in a gunfight, I don't necessarily know if you're a shooter or not. Does that? That's a bad example to give in church. But anyway, so, that's the thing. But we, instead of worrying about what I'm not, figure out what I am and celebrate it. What can I do with what I've got? Okay, so is it true? Yes or no? No, Fido. Yes. Then ask the second question, can I change it? If it's not changeable, I'm not going to worry about something I can't change. And that's about everything. If somebody doesn't like me based on my race, I don't get to be a victim because I'm this race. I can't change it. And if the way you feel about it bothers me, then there's something wrong with me. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. How do I cope with it? And so it's this idea of, am I giving away my self-control, giving away my ability? Can I influence what happens to me? So is it true? Can I change it? Well, yeah, here's something you can change. Well, now the question is, does it need to be changed? And this is where our society has messed up, and especially with social media and Instagram and the things that your children are reading and listening to. Because a lot of times the people who have all the time in the world to post opinions, they're not doing other productive things, so their opinions aren't that healthy. Just a general feeling I have about that. Okay, now I have a podcast. I have time to post opinions about things, but I generate income from the podcast. So it's sort of my job. I'm not just sitting around in somebody's basement because I'm miserable. When they came out to the riot in Huntsville and they put us on the ground with those 1,000 people who were pitching a fit over a guy they'd never met. Well, I had really enough issues on my day that day that, I could have been worrying about other stuff. But here these people were. They have so little lives and so little productivity, they got to get wrapped around the axle about something that happened in Minnesota. I'm more involved in life than to worry about your problems. Well, if a child doesn't have that sense of, I take control of what I've got, and I'm going to own it, that's a bad thing. So can I change it? Yes. Then does it need to be changed? Okay, Lonnie, not only are you short and bald, but you're a little fluffy around the edges. Is that true? Hey, yeah. My doctor says I should weigh 149 pounds. The last time I saw 149 was on a sign going to Memphis. There's no way I'm going to weigh 149 pounds. I'd have to be in a prison camp to weigh 149 pounds. But I've got a hobby, and I share that hobby with police officers. I am never the youngest guy in that room, and I'm never the largest guy in that room. In fact, I spend a lot of my days with people half my age, twice my size. And about 185 pounds is a good fighting weight for me. I wrestle a guy named Colum. He's in a jiu-jitsu competition today in Nashville, Tennessee. He's in the super heavyweight division. The only guy he's going to fight with today is a guy named Jerry King. Jerry King is the love child between a silverback gorilla and a grizzly bear. Okay, I got a picture of King on my phone. It's frightening. I wouldn't fight that guy without a pistol, outside of training. But it, so yeah, I'm a little heavier than I need to be. But I made a choice that this is my fighting weight. I'm going to walk around like this so that when I do this thing I do as a hobby, it doesn't need to change. And so I don't really care what you think about my weight. So when I make a decision, hey, you said something about me is true, and it can change, and I've chosen not to change it. Well, if I've chosen not to change it, and what you think about it bothers me, I'm really not owning it. Right? Now, I'm about to kick a hornet's nest, and I don't want to have to fight anybody, but there are people who are Tennessee fans. Bless you. That fight song sounds like you've taken a stainless steel armadillo and rubbed it across a metal chalkboard. Okay? I wouldn't crawl across a room full of Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders to listen to that thing, okay? I mean, it just bothers me to death. But guess what? What I think about that doesn't bother her. You know why? Because she's a Tennessee fan. Now, she might be entirely functional, but she's a Tennessee fan. But if what I think about her being a Tennessee fan bothers her, she's not a Tennessee fan. Unapologetic, go Vols, or whatever that means, okay? You have a hound dog. It doesn't make sense, okay? Go Snoopy, I get. Go Vols, I don't get. You got a dog on the sideline. Same thing with War Eagle and you got a tiger. There's a lot of messed up stuff in SEC football, okay? I'm just telling you that right now. But if I choose to be a fan of this, my opinion about it doesn't bother her at all. And in a public forum, what does she do? Woohoo! I'm happy she didn't break out in a Rocky Top. Don't you do it, okay? So if I decide I'm going to wear black hair, black eyebrows, black makeup, black fingernail polish, black shirt, black pants, black socks, and black shoes, and you don't like it, it shouldn't bother me. I've decided to wear my costume. And if how you feel about my costume bothers me, then it's a costume. And I'm wanting some kind of reaction out of you. Do you get that? Hey, what does this mean? What does this costume? It's not a costume, dude. What does this costume mean? It doesn't mean anything. Oh, then you won't mind if your parents ask you not to wear it. That legit? Well, no, it means that I don't believe in Izod and I don't believe in polo. And if you're not going to be my friend just on how you're dressed, this is kind of tells you to leave me alone. I'd buy into that. But if you wear a no trespassing sign and then you whine because people won't trespass, does it need to be changed? Hey, what are you doing? What are you hoping to accomplish by it? And does it work? Well, if it's not working, change something. But a lot of times we adopt these behaviors, and that's the hard part in mental health. Is it mental illness or is it maladaptive behavior? And maladaptive behavior is this: I've got this set of rules that I think works for me, and it works to a certain extent or you wouldn't still be here, right? I mean, it has to work on some level or you wouldn't still be there. But it works suboptimally and it doesn't get you all the rewards that you want to get. So maladaptive behavior, I come from my house and I don't think I'm capable and I don't think I'm significant. So I've adopted this shifting behaviors to try to interact with the world to help me survive. And sometimes that doesn't work, but it doesn't work so bad that I think I need to change it. Does that make sense? A truly delusional person doesn't care that I don't believe his delusion. He just thinks I'm an idiot. First day as an intern. I mean, the ink is not dry on my master's degree. And I'm doing my internship at Marshall-Jackson County Mental Health Center. They sit me in a room with an 82-year-old psychiatrist and a dude, paranoid schizophrenic. He sits like this, like he's wearing a straitjacket. His wrists are too big to put a pair of cuffs on. It's a big dude. And he's talking, and I'm a new grad student. I'm taking my little notes, and I wear a little tie. And he talking pretty normal for about 15 minutes. And then he tells Dr. Trainer that he's a 400-year-old FBI agent. Well, I've got a brand new shiny master's degree. I can solve this. Sir, the country's only been here 200 years. You can't be a 400-year-old FBI agent. To which he replies, I said I was 400 years old. And an FBI agent, try to take better notes. I mean, he had no concern for me that I didn't buy into his delusion. So if a person says, I think I'm this, a boy, a girl, a cat, a furry, a Martian, an Old Testament prophet, a 5th century druid, if you really are convinced of that, you don't care what I think about it. And if what I think about it bothers you, hurts your feelings, and you really aren't convinced of that, you're saying it to get a response out of me. Okay? And other than Klinefelter syndrome, other than someone who's born intersex, or other than someone who's born with a psychological disorder called gender dysphoria, you really don't have that kind of thinking. Okay? And the people who say, oh, you've thought this about what I said, you're intolerant or you're unkind or you're unloving or you're unchristian. If what I think about your delusion bothers you, you really hadn't bought into that. I can influence what happens to me. I get to choose whether I'm a victim or whether I buy into these things. I'm unapologetically a Christian. I'm not mean about it. I'm not nasty about it. I try to be assertive without being aggressive. I understand you may have a different worldview, but this is my worldview. And if you think I'm a knuckle dragger or a mouth breather or believe in fairy tales, that you'll have to believe that about me. I'm okay with it. But if I'm waiting on your approval to have my set of beliefs, then they're really not my set of beliefs. So I'm capable. I'm significant. I can influence what happens to me. So is it true? Can I change it? Does it need to be changed? Now, if you tell me, hey, and it's true, and I can change it, and it needs to be changed, then you've told me something that I need to do to make me better. And if I get wrapped around the axle about that, that says more about me than it does about you. So now, those are the three perceptions about being self-reliant. And can you already see how the digital media, the digital world interferes with those things? Because we get our standards from other places, and then we have an external locus of control rather than an internal locus of control. We have this idea that I don't get to value test this against a good source. I can only have outside sources tell me about these things. And so that compromises who we are. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Pretty interesting stuff. Then you have 4 skill levels. So once a student has these perceptions, then they've got to interact with the world and they've got to master 4 things. And the 4 skills are intrapersonal skills, they're interpersonal skills, there's systemic skills, and then there's judgmental skills. Now, intrapersonal skills is learning to deal with me. Basically, and this is directly out of Glenn's book. It's a quote from his book. It's the ability to understand your personal emotions and use that understanding to develop self-discipline, self-control, and to learn from experience. So let's camp out there. The number one predictor for your child's success is not their ACT, not their SAT, and not their GPA. Your number one predictor for your child's success is their emotional intelligence. I read the book by Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence basically, number one, says, do I have insight into my own emotions? Can I know a feeling as it happens? Because a lot of times we don't really emotion label. You know, give me a male child or give me an adolescent anything, and aggression is how they manifest fear or insecurity. Okay? And with men, you show me a lot of aggression, I'll show you a lot of insecurity. Okay? When you go jogging and the dog barks at you, that dog wants you to think, I'm mean. A mean dog will bite you. They don't announce their presence. You go, hey, wow, I think I got dog bit. But a dog who's barking at you is actually telling you, I'm afraid, but I'm acting angry, so you'll leave me alone. Okay? So emotional intelligence, do I understand my emotions? Do I understand the feeling when it happens? And secondly, do I understand that my emotions are information, not instruction? And that's a really, really big deal. See, information versus instruction. And people who get a lot of dopamine pumped into their system, they get instantaneous feedback. Everything they do in the digital world has an instant feedback loop. They don't learn to process emotions as a warning to slow down. Processing emotion is an instantaneous call to action, especially first-person shooter games, combat games. Because what do you have to do in a combat game? If it's dangerous, kill it. Well, those are emotional responses. And I'm not saying that they breed violence. I'm just saying that it teaches a synapse that happens in the brain. And you get this cycle where they start looking at a lot of peripheral details. In a first-person shooter game, you're looking for danger everywhere. And so you begin to be able to be irrelevant or be really, really flippant with things you should pay a lot of attention to. So if you've been cooking your brain on combat-style games and you're supposed to sit in a room and concentrate on this thing, that person moved. I see a fly. There's something out the window. they've been trained by their little brain to just score and score and score and score. And so they don't have this emotional regulation. So do I understand a feeling when it happens? Can I label it? And do I understand that my emotions are information, not instruction? So I don't know in a church group if this will be offensive or not. I'm 61 years old. And so one of my things I didn't list in my bio is I have to pee a lot because I'm 61 years old, okay? At my age, never skip a nap, never pass a bathroom. That's just the way it goes, I go to these places to speak, I go, where's your men room? And they go, well, you need, yeah, so you can go while I'm speaking. If I go while I'm speaking, it makes everybody uncomfortable, okay? So Sunday afternoon when I leave here, I will call my wife on my cell phone. Honey, I'm headed home. It's an hour and 50 minutes. Somewhere between here and Huntsville, I'm going to stop, I promise you. Okay? And I'll stop the tactical Toyota. I'll call Jack and say, I'm going to the men's room. 35 minutes later, I get back in the car. Baby, I'm back on the road. What took you so long? Well, I walked in this little gas station, and there's a big sign over the door that said clean restrooms. I had to find a mop and a bucket, some rubber gloves. They didn't have any hot water. And she goes, no, the sign says the restrooms are clean. It doesn't tell you to clean the restrooms. Young people who have feelings and can't regulate think their feelings tell them to do something, not just tells them something. That's why you see on social media, I've got a girl who spends all her time worrying about likes and dislikes and drama on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook. And if she's not in crisis, she's not having a good night. And she got to keep her pulse on all this stuff. And, how's everything going? I'm having a wonderful time. How many people send you messages after that? It's been a bad day. My parents hate me. I thought about cutting myself. Guess how many people are going to write her that night? Guess how long she'll be up? Why? Those emotions create drama. Drama creates importance. Importance creates connection. And it becomes this self-fulfilling loop for folks. So when I understand, hey, my emotions aren't telling me I've got to act this way. My emotions are telling me to be careful or I'll end up acting this way. Make sense? So now, if I have enough insight and I understand my emotions and I understand that those emotions are information, not instruction, then I can respond to my emotions with self-regulation. And self-regulation has three components: delayed gratification, impulse control, and motivation. I look at what I want now, I look at what I want most, and I can make a choice between what I want now and deal with some adversity to get what I want most. Guess what? Social media and interactive video games that are educational, that are not educational but recreational, do to a kid. Instant gratification. Impulse control goes out the window, and I don't have to work hard for anything because I can ignore homework, I can ignore schoolwork, I can ignore studying. I'm going to do my homework, but I'm going to use a computer. How much work gets done on a computer? And how much TikTok and how much YouTube gets done on a computer when you're supposed to be working on your homework? All the negative, adverse things that we'll talk about when we talk about social media and the internet, if you use it for education, those things aren't true. But when you use them for recreation, they are true because they erode the foundation of learning how to manage instant gratification and learning how to manage impulse control. And then you're not able to work hard toward a long distance goal. Read Angela Duckworth's book, Grit. And it basically, she developed a 10-point scale to predict whether students would complete West Point or not. And it has nothing to do with cadet score, athletic ability, or academic ability. It's a series of questions. Have you ever done anything for more than 3 years? Did you quit band? Did you quit baseball? Did you quit softball? Did you quit bowling? And if you don't have anybody who's pursued anything from start to finish, they don't have what she calls grit. And so now, this emotional intelligence, it undergirds everything for me getting on with other people. Because, see, the next thing here is the ability to understand my emotions and use that understanding to develop self-discipline, self-control, and learn from experience, learns into interpersonal skills. And that's when the me that's me runs into the you that's you. Well, guess what happens when you spend all your time on the internet? You don't know other people. You don't know how to interact with your home. You know how to talk to people. The cadets that are coming out of the police academy right now, if they could pull up to your house and text you, they could make a call. But to knock on that door, to walk up to somebody and introduce, it's a dumpster fire. It's unbelievable how lack of skills they have in interacting with other people. And then you've got to go into a situation, interact with other people, and be in charge. Oh, wow. It's very, very scary for those young people. So interpersonal skills allow the individual to work with others, develop friendships using communication, cooperation, negotiation, sharing, empathizing, and listening. You see how being enmeshed in a totally digital world erases those things? In fact, not only do they not exist, they don't develop. So if you were to read from Daniel Goleman's book, and I usually like to take stuff and make it my own. I kind of like to make my own translation out of stuff. But this is Goleman talking about emotional intelligence, and I'll read you straight from his book. Emotional insight, knowing one's emotions, self-awareness, recognizing a feeling as it happens, psychological insight and self-awareness. Number 2, self-regulation, managing my emotions. Handling feelings so that they are appropriate is an ability that builds on self-awareness. So I know who I am, I know what I'm feeling, I know why I'm feeling it. I know what the feeling is. This includes self-soothing, shaking off rampant anxiety, gloom, irritability, and the consequences of failure. Those who are poor at this skill are constantly battling feelings of distress. Have you noticed how distressed our younger generation is right now? Anxiety, gloom, irritability, and the consequences of failure. And they don't know how to self-soothe. Well, that's because there's no emotional intelligence, and they're losing the ability to develop emotional intelligence because they don't interact with other people's emotions, they don't interact with their own emotions. Number 3, motivating yourself. You have these emotions, and you can self-soothe, and you can put off gloom and anxiety and irritability. You marshal your emotions in the service of a goal, and you marshaling those emotions is essential for paying attention, self-motivation, mastery, and creativity. Because if I just quit because it's hard, I quit because it's not fun, I quit because it's boring, guess how many things I actually accomplish that are worthwhile? None. And now you know why you have 37-year-olds still living in mom's basement, eating Cheetos. Not that there's anything wrong with Cheetos. They're orange, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's an orange you can tolerate, okay? Number 4, interpersonal skills. Recognizing the emotions in others. Empathy, another ability that builds on emotional self-awareness, is the fundamental people skill. People who are empathetic are more attuned to the subtle social signals that indicate what others need or want. And if I've got empathy, then I can manage relationships. This is a skill in managing the emotions of others. I have feelings, therefore I recognize that you have feelings. And if I can recognize and label your feelings, then I can go, oh, they're feeling this. And if I were feeling that, I would want somebody to do X, Y, or Z, right? This is the tipping point between social competence and social incompetence. If you have these abilities, they undergird popularity, leadership, and interpersonal effectiveness. Now, you take a kid who's only consumed with the internet and himself and the stuff they want. You've just explained why this digital society, these digital natives, are like they're living on an island by themselves. Now, these are 2 completely different theories. Stephen Glenn's book came out in the late 70s. Emotional intelligence came out in the 90s. The digital realm hit us, and all those things to me are singing the same song just from different perspectives. Your next skill level is systemic skills. And this undergirds the idea of the interpersonal, intrapersonal, and the emotional intelligence. Because now there's the me that's me, there's the you that's you, and there's way more yous than there are me's. And so I go to school, I live in a community, I go to a church, I'm part of a family. It gives me the ability to respond to the everyday life consequences with responsibility, adaptability, flexibility, and integrity. And so that I'm not always going to be the pitcher for the baseball team. My artwork doesn't always end up on the fridge. I'm not always first. I have to wait in my line. Sometimes I get cut. Freshmen don't start. Freshmen don't play. All those kind of things that normal life, as I interact with it, I go, oh, that's just part of the system. But if I don't know about systems, I don't know the systemic skills, then every time I don't get my way, every time I get disappointed, every time I get frustrated, it's life-altering, and it's the end of the world. That emotional dysregulation, it's either perfect or it's a failure. And then the last skill set that Glenn talks about is judgmental skills. I have the ability to use wisdom to evaluate situations according to values. And again, learning values, where do you learn your values from? From interacting with adults, interacting with real people, interacting with extended family. But if all I do is spend time by myself in a gaming system or in an online community that is a self-reinforcing confirmation loop, I don't know anything about the world. And I'm either a victim or a narcissist because there's not a lot of balance out there in the digital world. And so we teach our kids values, we don't teach our kids rules. And if you'll notice, when we teach our kids only rules, they don't have a lot of value in helping them stay straight, helping them stay good. The passage in Colossians, where he says, don't let anybody defraud you, don't let anybody steal your reward. Don't get suckered into these things. Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle. These things have an appearance of wisdom, of false humility, and harsh treatment of the body, but they are of no value against the indulgences of the flesh. Paul says teaching people what we're against doesn't do any good. When I teach you about honesty, I teach you about purity, and I teach you about integrity, you've already predetermined what the rules are. How short is too short, how tight is too tight, how low is too low, how far is too far, how much is too much. Can you do that and be pure? That's a yes or no question. Freed Hardman doesn't get to determine that. No offense to Freed, okay? Or Harding, or Faulkner, or Pepperdine. How far is too far? How much is too much? Well, can you say it and maintain your integrity as a Christian? No, don't say it. So instead of this set of rules, I live my life by values. And it's interesting that when you take all those things, self-discipline, self-control, communication, cooperation, negotiation, sharing, empathizing, listening, responsibility, adaptability, flexibility, integrity, wisdom, and appropriate values. Oh, wow. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Is anybody shocked by that? When Jesus taught about emotional intelligence, he said, you want to fulfill everything God's ever talked about? What did Jesus say? Love your neighbor as yourself. If I have a good sense of self, then I know how to treat you. Now, if I don't have a good sense of self, I don't have any value, and I either overvalue you or undervalue you, or I'm a narcissist and I undervalue you. But inherent to the Christian ethic is a balance of self. And if I understand and can do self-regulation, self-insight, self-understanding, I can do these things. Because maturing as a Christian is not how many appearances you make at a building. It's not how many things you win at Lands to Leaders. It's not how many mission trips you go on. It's not how many evangelistic campaigns you do. It's not how many service projects you do. Do you possess these qualities? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. When you do that, number one, you have maturity. Number two, you have spiritual self-reliance. And then number 3, you're independent, because I have to ask the youth ministers, is this right or wrong? I don't have to ask this school of thought or this school of preaching, is this right or wrong? I've got a set of values that are based on these things. I'm going to make a decision. Does it violate one of these parameters? Yeah, can't do it. I'm going to say this, post this, read this, play this, watch it. Does it violate one of those things? Can't do it. And so what it teaches is that emotional intelligence and spiritual self-reliance are the same thing said differently. One is from a purely secular research viewpoint. The other one is based in the spiritual wisdom of the Holy Spirit. And so what happens when we start talking about this is what we're going to talk about tomorrow. You are witnesses in God also. How devoutly, justly, and blameless we behaved ourselves among you. As you know, we exhorted, we comforted, and we charged every one of you as a father does his own children. That's the parenting verse in the Bible. Now, you thought it was children obey your parents in the Lord, and fathers don't provoke your children to wrath. Paul, through the Holy Spirit, said, if I were a father, these are the things I would be, and these are the things I would do for my children. Encourage, comfort, and urge. Guess what encourage, comfort, and urge does? I'm capable, I'm significant, I can influence what happens to me. And then basically that last thing says that you walk worthy of God who calls into his own kingdom and glory. The New Century Version says that you live lives for God who calls into his glorious kingdom. And the New English Version says to live in a way that would honor God. And so when I start thinking about parenting, I want my children to be successful. I want my children to be popular. I want my children to be smart. I want my children to have a better life than I had. But if they don't live in a way that honors God, I failed as a parent. And if I let them have access to this thing that cuts them off from interaction with other adults, cuts them off from understanding the real three-dimensional world, I run into some problems. So if you want to read a really, really scary but good book, it's a book called The Wired Child. W-I-R-E-D, The Wired Child. And these are the highlights of that. Children are moving toward independence, and their absorption in technology, iPads, screens, phones, fosters a false sense of being independent when what they need is modeling and connecting with adults. I'm by myself, I'm in my room, nobody bothers me, I'm playing my game. I've got this false sense of independence, but I don't know how to do laundry, I don't know how to talk to people, I don't know how to cut the grass, I don't know how to cook. Because how do children learn those things? They learn from modeling with parents. Number 2, the family breakdown leads to destructive behavior. If I'm not interacting with dad, if I'm not interacting with mom, if I'm not interacting with an older brother, if I'm not interacting with my uncle, it leads to destructive behavior. At-risk behavior has a direct link in family disconnection. There's an MIT psychologist that has a book called Alone Together. Being in a room with your children and you looking at your phone and them looking at their phones is not family time. Sitting in a restaurant with your family and you checking the internet is not the same. And really the bottom line between managing your children's social media consumption is managing your own. And that's it. And you should learn that your children are going to do either what they see you do or what you allow them to do. And children will follow the path of least resistance. We would not let our children choose their own bedtimes and choose their own meals. Right? But we give them indiscriminate choice about how much social media they consume and how much Switch, Xbox, PlayStation time they have. Does that make sense to anybody in this room? I'll let you have to eat this, you have to wear that, you have to go to bed now. You can't play outside, it's too cold, it's been too hot. Here's this thing that connects to everything in the world, go play with it without my supervision. That doesn't make sense to me in any place. There's a group of people called Marketing to Moms. And they've discovered that mom is the primary decision maker about the use of technology. Now, why is that? Because mom's home with the little heathen all day. And at some point you go, read this, look at this, play that, kill zombies, whatever. And so rather than dad making these decisions, mom make these decisions, and they realize, it's a pretty good default instant babysitter, and it's easy to fall into that temptation. Hey, when our daughter was little, Barney videos. But she couldn't go from a Barney video to a YouTube video to tell her that she's not a girl. It was just Barney. This thing, you can connect to anything in the world, and you don't think children are smart enough to chase those rabbit holes. And you don't think the people who are selling that stuff doesn't have it a way that if you press the wrong button, you use the wrong symbol, it takes you down the rabbit hole. They're predators looking for your children. Okay? There is a blatant effort to have parents disregard the research of the negative impact and embrace the false positives of more tech equals more closeness in the family. They've got false research that says, hey, if your family plays video games together, you're close. What's called alone together. And FaceTime cannot replace face-to-face time. That's the big thing you got to know. And by the way, it's not the use of technology, it's the misuse of technology. Because technology used for educational purposes and not just entertainment purposes doesn't have any of these negative impacts. It's the difference in, are you reading a comic book or are you reading a textbook? Which has educational value? Okay? Now, if you had a choice, I'm going to lock you in this room for 6 hours. You're going to read comic books or textbooks? I'm going to read comics. Why? I like artwork. Well, guess what a kid will do without parental discretion? He'll always eat dessert, not the vegetables. Okay? The bottom line behind all social media, internet problem is basically it interrupts attachment. Children who spend all their time alone fail to attach with their parents, fail to attach with family, and fail to attach with adults. And some of the worst behavior I see as a therapist comes from a disruption in attachment. And when children are not attached to their adults, they don't learn from adults. If they don't learn from adults, guess who they learn from? Whoever's in control of that. Whoever's in control of that. That's just it. Read the book Sticky Faith. The book Sticky Faith is about raising the next generation of Christians. It was done on Protestants, not just the Church of Christ, but on Protestants. And it basically said we can look at these things and predict whether or not a child who grew up in this religious system will be in that system and hold these values after they're in college. And the factor was, do you have 5 mature Christian in your life? And that's, do I know somebody who's in college? Do I know somebody who's a senior citizen? Do I know somebody who's a middle married? Not, hey, I want my teenager to develop spiritually. I'm going to let him hang out exclusively with other teenagers. When did we ever believe that was a good idea? I don't want my teenager learning from another teenager what sex is. I don't want my teenager learning from another teenager how to drive. I want an adult. So your family ministry and your youth ministry should be very, very close together. Because my child at age 14 didn't think I was cool. But my child at age 14 thought somebody else at church was cool. And somebody else at 14-year-old thought I was cool. And so you surround them with 5 mature spiritual adults. Well, if I'm only letting my child interact socially, if they interact with an adult on social media, guess who it's going to be? A predator. So only talking to other girls about I've got this set of books. They're not real books. I call it books from Obvious Publishing. We put the O in obvious. And one of the titles we have is Rebel Against Your Father, Run Away from Home, Nearly Destroy the World, Marry the Prince. A Disney guide to navigating adolescence for girls. Okay? I mean, right? Have you noticed that theme in the movies? You do everything wrong, you have a happy ending, live happily. No, I don't want my daughter growing up with that model. Guess what that model is when you look at social media? Because the girls who are out here dating boys, and they're out here playing ball, and they're out here involved in social activities, and they're out here involved in athletics, they feel bad, they're depressed, they're by themselves, they're full of anxiety, and they cut themselves. And they're talking about it with the other girls who feel the same way. And so instead of somebody saying, hey, y'all need to wake up, that's not the way life really works, what do they get? Reinforced. But if they see mom and dad navigate stress, they see mom and dad navigate chores, they see mom and dad navigate financial problems, they see mom and dad navigate arguments, they learn this is not the way the world works, this is the way the world. But failure to do that leads to a disruption in attachment. And children who aren't attached end up being aberrant children. And just do any kind of a Google search on reactive attachment disorder. Read anything Dan Siegel writes about attachment. Too much screen time in front of a television or in front of a screen results in a process called understimulation. Now, a lot of times we think it's overstimulation, right? Well, guess what happens when you look at a screen and they're doing all the thinking and creating all the images for you? Your brain goes to sleep. You enter into a brainwave pattern called theta waves. Anybody know about theta waves? Theta waves are what I use to hypnotize. I want you to listen to my voice, and I want you to relax. All your cares are floating out the window like the cloud you're watching. Now breathe in and breathe out. And all of a sudden, I'm going to have you barking like a chicken every time the minister says Ecclesiastes. Because it's not overstimulation. And, you think with all the colors and all the sounds and all the stuff, it would be overstimulation. It's understimulation because I'm not having to use my brain. I listen to a book on tape as I'm driving. I've got to create the scene. I read a book. I got to create the scene. Well, they do all the hard work for you. And so it results in understimulation rather than overstimulation. Now, you notice my slides aren't very cool. Okay, I read stuff to you. This is one of 4 presentations I do with slides. I call it Death by PowerPoint, okay? And a lot of times I don't even use slides. I use an iPad and I draw and project it on the screen. And I came to the conclusion that, we get into a group of people, whether it's 50 people or 5,000 people, and we show a stand-up comedian will walk onto a stage with a bar stool and a glass of water and talk for 4 hours and hold people's attention. Why? He's engaging his audience. He's a master of his craft. As a teacher of the Bible, if I can teach you to think while we study, then it's not what I said, it's what you've learned. And so that's why I don't have cool stuff. I want you to be engaged in this thing. An experience that is linked with an emotion becomes a memory. When kids spend time on the internet, guess what they remember? The trauma part, not the educational part. They remember the things blow up. They remember the things melt. They remember that Darth Vader has a lightsaber, but they don't remember the educational part of it because we're focusing the emotional connection to the wrong part of the stuff, and that's by design. I want you to keep coming back for more, coming back for more, coming back for more. Let me hit a couple of more things. I know I'm out of time. We are substituting technology for adult-parent interaction. And that violates a lot of things like we talked about with sticky faith. The internet fosters unhealthy bonds with other teenagers, with unhealthy people, and then we have unhealthy family bonds because we have lack of attention, we have lack of enmeshment, and we have lack we have enmeshment, which is the reverse of positive attention. And then unbonded students don't have modeling for good behavior. They don't connect to the adults in their lives. And you've seen children who look like they were raised feral. What you need to be teaching in your family is routine, tradition, and rituals. Routine, traditions, and rituals. And a kid who spends all their time on this doesn't know how to cook, doesn't know how to clean, doesn't know how to bake with mom. I'm going to learn how to make an omelet, and I'll look it up on YouTube. Versus my grandmother taught me how to make an omelet. I'm going to learn how to build a birdhouse. I'm going to look it up on YouTube, or I'm going to Grandpa's shop with him, and we're going to learn to run a saw and nail nails together. Which one do you think has lasting learning value? And yet what is this? Younger than, say, 30, they don't value the use of mentors. They want somebody their age telling them how to do what and how to be cool. Where when I was growing up, you found a guy who was a master at something, you asked to spend a day with him. Right? That's not happening. What's the biblical model? Let the older women teach let the older men teach and now we've got younger men teaching younger men. There's a thing, and I don't know all the details, but in some game park, they were preserving elephants. And the adolescent elephants and the females, because they were protecting them from being hunted, the young elephants started crashing into huts. they started literally forcing sex on the female elephants. They went out into the deep jungle and they captured 2 multi-ton big bull elephants and they dropped them in the middle of that herd. Guess what happened to the behavior of the young elephants? Yeah, it straightened out real fast. Because with the absence of a mature adult male, a young adult male is going to do what? Live by his hormones. Well, guess what a teenager is going to do in the absence of mature adults? Guess what a teenager is going to do in the absence of spiritual maturity? Instant gratification, no impulse control, and they're not going to have self-regulation or motivation. All right, I've talked longer than I should talk. So before we dismiss, any questions about the stuff we've covered? Was it practical or too theoretical? Okay, so tomorrow we're going to do encourage, comfort, and urge from the Thessalonians verse. One of those is how to foster I'm capable, I'm significant. Comfort is crisis intervention, how to deal with your kids when they have an emotional blow up. And urge, we're going to talk about discipline. So encourage, comfort, and urge will be our 3 models for tomorrow from Thessalonians.
I noticed one thing you said about the I am capable, I'm significant, I can influence what happens to me. Where you were bringing that out, I think you also brought up something very good about how we as parents don't feel capable or significant or that we can influence what happens if we think this, like as far as the digital world is concerned, well, I just can't keep up with all of this, and I'll just let the kids do it. By doing that, they're not feeling capable, significant, and they don't have influence. We don't feel the same, and everything goes feral.
And that's that false idea of digital native, digital immigrant. Well, you know, I'm an idiot. I can't do Facebook. Guess what? I can learn it. I can learn enough to talk to my kid with informed consent and say, hey, here's some things, but there's some inherent dangers here. So here are the things you've got to watch out for. And we need to understand that if you type in this and get this, I need to know about it.
Yeah. By you pointing that out, you're putting the controls back in our hands.
Yes. And then when you tell a kid, hey, this is something that can show up, they don't feel shocked that it showed up. And they don't mind, hey, Dad, that thing you told me about actually happened. Really cool. What'd you see? But if I don't act like it's there and then you find it, then it becomes this secret and then shame falls in. And I'm not significant. Shame is the fear of loss of connection. So I look at something I shouldn't have looked at. I can't tell my dad. I can't tell my youth minister. I'm definitely not telling mom. You know, all of a sudden it just goes south. And so the idea that if you've got kids and you're struggling with this digital stuff, you've got to be as informed about it as you can be without being an expert on it. I'm pretty much, tech illiterate, but I know enough about it to keep other people safe. And that's really all you have to know. Cool. Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
So I've been reading this book, I think it's called The Healing Church. And it talks about how bad this younger generation has gotten around pornography, right? And that, everything that you're talking about sounds like, this is just the perfect recipe for that kind of exposure to our youth, to our young men, and that kind of thing. And so, it's just a very troubling thing that it's not only the disconnect that they have, that the children are having with the parents, with society, but also just how they're getting stuck in whether it's gambling, whether it's pornography or
delayed gratification and impulse control. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole thing.
Thank you.
Can I take a few more minutes? So, and I don't want to be cavalier. I don't want you to understand, I believe pornography is one of the greatest dangers to our men and our young men that exist. It does a couple of things. It replaces wholesome stuff with fantasy stuff. It raises unrealistic expectations. It does a fantasy versus reality, all kind of things like that, okay? But you give me a 15-year-old boy and mom catches him, on the iPad looking at naked girls, and he comes to my office. I go, so, we're looking at naked girls, are we? Yes, sir. Praise God. Okay? He's 15 years old and needs to be interested in naked girls. All right? I get that. I think it's a sin. I think he shouldn't do it. but I think it's reasonably normal and somewhat actually healthy physiologically. I think it's sinful, so we have to have this discussion. This is not the way you learn about naked girls. But if you're 15 years old and you've seen one naked girl, guess what? You want to collect the whole set. Because there are blonde naked girls, there are brown-headed naked girls, there are red-headed naked girls, there's Chinese naked girls, there's all kinds of naked girls out there. You're a teenage boy, you're interested in naked girls, I'm proud of you, okay? But this is not the way you learn about naked girls. But at the time that I'm looking at naked girls and it's just about naked girls and sex, at some point I start looking at naked girls because I'm bored, I'm stressed, I'm hungry, I'm angry, I'm lonely, or I'm tired. And now this interest in naked girls is not about information or sexuality, it's become a mood stabilizer. And that works the same way as pills, as crack, as coke, as gambling. That's why, although it's not officially in the book as a pornographic addiction, it fits the model. Because now, instead of eating because I like donuts, I eat because I'm stressed. Well, that leads to obesity. It's not that I drink chocolate milk because I like chocolate milk. It's I'm angry. It gives me a sugar rush. So when this interest in girls, and that's just something you got to learn to deal with, guys. But when this interest in girls leaves girls, and I use girls because I'm bored, stressed, hungry, angry, and only tired, that's when you begin to objectify women. That's when it becomes a compulsion. That's when it becomes a habit. That's when it becomes an addiction. This is sinful, but healthy. This is sinful and unhealthy. And so when you start talking to your kids about pornography, not just don't look at naked girls. Make sure that if you are doing this, number one, we need to find a way to stop it. But has it gone to the point where you're only looking at them when you're bored, stressed, hungry, angry, and only tired? That's when you're in the danger zone. This is normal, and we can fix that. This gets into danger zone. You're talking lifelong addiction problems. And this is the scary. This is not scary to me. This is normal to me. This is scary. Does that make sense? Okay. Understand, I don't think pornography is appropriate in any way, shape, or form. But there's normal dangerous pornography, and there's lethal, toxic, nuclear radiation danger pornography.
To your point about saying to a 15-year-old boy that's struggling with this, I think that initial statement, God be praised, causes us to go, whoa. But I remember had an individual talking to me about being addicted to heroin. And my response was, God be praised. It's amazing, the same statement, because you would probably go, what are you talking about? We went to Luke 16, and the rich man was addicted to water and could not get the fix for water. And I said, God be praised that your addiction is heroin, because you can overcome that, but there's a gulf that's firmly fixed for the rich man. And so the idea is, this is something that you can overcome through God, and God be praised that can take place, but there comes a time where you're not going to be able to.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying, could that be giving somebody a positive in the midst of a very challenging situation where you're saying, God can bring you through this?
You're only tempted by the things that you're attracted to. And it's not what you want that leads to sin, but that you have the capacity to want. I want my family to be fed and sheltered. That's not a bad thing, but if I cheat, lie, or skip church to do it, a very healthy want now becomes dangerous. I want people to like me. Actually, I don't care, but I want people to like me, okay? And so I'm going to compromise the truth. I'm going to try to be politically correct, and I'm not going to call sin so that people will like me. Well, I just took a healthy want, and it got corrupted. And so, yeah, the same kind of thing. And when you start talking about addiction, I believe addiction is trauma-based. And trauma is not something nasty that happened, but something that was significant. And it's not what are you using, but what were you feeling when you decided to use. And if I can find the feeling that's connected to the decision to use, I can break the addiction. And so when you start talking to the kids, you're looking at you spend a lot of time. Why? Bored, stressed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Oh, wow, I didn't realize that. And you're honest with a 15-year-old boy, he'll go, you realize, wow, you're right. Had a bad day at school, I got stressed out over a test, I didn't do good at practice, I came home, and then you can identify the addiction cycle. I think it's super important to communicate to our kids openly about that. Okay? All right.
Questions? Okay, very good.
I'll quit on time tomorrow, I promise.
Yes, this is being streamed right now, so we will have this for posterity. Right. Thank you, Lonnie. That was an excellent talk. A lot of practical information and also a lot of insight into the balance between dependence and independence that parents need to work on. So thank you so much for that. We do have refreshments after. As many of you know, we will be having 8:15 tomorrow. Lonnie is going to give the second lesson. That same lesson will also be shared at 10:30 as well. So just like we normally do for our two services, Bible class, Lonnie will be sharing the third lesson, and then at 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock will be the fourth one. We will have a potluck tomorrow at 11:30 before that. So if you have any more questions about the schedule tomorrow, let me know. I know it's a lot to kind of balance. So we're going to go ahead and say a closing prayer, and we do have some refreshments provided in the fellowship hall, and you're welcome to go over there and join us for that. Let's go ahead and go to God in prayer. Dear Father, Lord, we thank you so much for this day you bless us with. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Lord, we've had to just listen to Lonnie, Lord, and the things he shared both from your word, Lord, and also from insight and from studies, Lord, and we just pray that we will use this knowledge, Lord, to better understand, first and foremost, how we ought to be as examples to children around us, Lord, and how we ought to focus on being first and foremost the kind of people that we should be, Lord, and then second, Lord, to also be able to be those who build up children from this generation, Lord, focusing on getting them to develop the skills that they need, Lord, and to have healthy interactions with each other, Lord, and to teach them to have a healthy relationship with technology. Lord, we pray that you will bless us as we continue to focus on serving you and growing closer to you and to each other. Thank you for all the blessings for this food we'll be receiving. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.